It's time for the Confidence Cultivator, where every week we explore ways to help you harness your communication superpower so you can increase your impact, gain influence, and build your career. To dig into this week's topic, here's Don King. And a good Monday morning to everybody. We are here with the Confidence Cultivator to talk this week about how you talk to yourself, self-talk for speaking success. That's something I think we all do as we're getting ready to speak. Professional speakers will talk about the stuff that we say at the beginning of a speech is throat clearing, things like, oh, isn't the weather wonderful, and that sort of thing. That's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about when you're backstage. We're talking about in the days leading up to a talk. We're even talking about what you say to yourself, not out loud, although sometimes it is, even when you're on stage. How are you thinking about your experience? The words that you choose shape your thinking, and your thinking shapes your experience. So remember, it's not what happens to you that determines your experience. It's what you think about what happens to you that determines your experience. So what we're going to suggest to you this week is that you give some conscious thought to what it is that you are saying to yourself. Now, one of the things that you can do is to stop thinking about what you're doing as a speech, because most people don't really think speech. They think speech. They think something really formal. Now, that's not really what's going on. What we're having when we speak to an audience is a planned conversation. Yes, you do plan it. Yes, you do know what you're going to talk about, but it's more like a conversation than like a performance. So if we start thinking of it as a conversation with friends you haven't met yet, think of it as something that you have planned, but conversations never go exactly the way that you plan. Remember back in high school when you were planning on asking somebody out for a date? Conversation probably didn't go the way you planned it, but the fact that you had planned it made a difference in your confidence level. Okay, so one of the things that we want to get in mind is the idea of connection before content. It doesn't mean the content doesn't matter. It does mean without the connection, the content won't matter. So we want to put that first. People are not going to remember the details anyway. They will remember the impression created by the details. So put connection before content. Another thing to keep in mind here is just the way you're thinking about your physical experience. Now, you're having an embodied experience. If we go back to that asking somebody out on a date thing, you probably felt something in your body. You were feeling shaky, maybe some tightness in your chest, couldn't stand still. I remember when I was in 8th grade wanting to ask somebody out. We just had telephones that were tied to the wall back then. Weren't able to carry them around with us like we can now. But the advantage was the person on the other end couldn't see me. And so it didn't matter if I was walking around or whatever, pacing. Still, I had that confidence that I had thought about it ahead of time, but I was still feeling what I would label trepidation. Now, one of the first things to get in mind as we think about how we think about this experience is to remember it's not fear, it's energy. Your body experience is going to be whatever it is. But think about this now. Just before you go to see a football game, maybe. Certainly before you take part in a football game. Basketball, tennis, whatever it might be. You can't sit still. You're feeling that in your body. You say to yourself, I am up for this game. But before you give your speech, you're feeling the same thing, and yet you may label it, I'm nervous. I have stage fright. It's just different ways of thinking about it. It's not fear, it's energy. In fact, buried within that example is another guideline for how to develop, how to cultivate this confidence in speaking. And that is to say to yourself, I'm up for this speech. This is not something we want to get rid of. If you're feeling this, it just means you care. You care about your topic. You care about your audience. You care about yourself. There would be something wrong with you if you were not feeling that. It just means you care. Yeah, it's a bit of a cliche, but I think it's worth repeating. We don't want to get rid of the butterflies. We just want to teach them to fly in formation. That means we want to harness that energy. We want to take that energy and put it to use. As Microsoft might say, it's not a bug, it's a feature. And truly, it is something for us to harness. So when you are feeling that, say to yourself, this is working as intended. I'm up for this speech. This means I care. And use that energy to focus. Now, let's give you a real practical aspect of this. If you find yourself kind of shaking before giving the speech, you think that the audience can see the shaking, and the reality is they can't. We're always comparing our insides to everyone else's outsides. But they're not mind readers. They don't know unless you tell them. And so recognizing that whatever registers with them, if you let it flow, it's going to register as energy. Think about what happens if you sit at a traffic light with your foot on the brake and the accelerator at the same time. The car shakes, doesn't it? And that's where a lot of your shaking comes from. You're trying to stop the flow of energy. When that traffic light turns green and you can just go, the shaking stops. That's because the energy now has somewhere to go. Channel that energy that you're feeling. Channel it into your delivery. Channel it into your voice. Let your caring show. We think that it's going to be over the top to the audience. That's because our senses are also sharpened by adrenaline. We sound louder to ourselves than we sound to them. We sound more animated to ourselves than we sound to them. It's not going to come across that way to them. Get out of the way. Let the energy flow. Put it to use. And these are the things that we should say to ourselves while we're backstage waiting to go on, while we're waiting for the camera to go on Zoom, whatever it might be. The way we think about it. It's not what happens to you, but what you think about your experience. Let me rephrase that. It's not what happens to you, but what you think about what happens to you that determines your experience. I hope these are some useful ideas to you. I would like to invite you to connect. If you're not already connected, the best way to do that is through LinkedIn. And you can also see my contact information up here, up above my shoulder. And if you can see it a little easier down there, you can always drop me a line. If you would like a free consultation, then feel free to follow this link. But I do have to say that because of everything else that's going on in my life, I've been trying to do these broadcasts every Monday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern time, and there's just too much else going on. One of the bits of wisdom that I'm having to apply in my own life is stepping back because of demands outside of business. I am just going to have to back off a bit. So if you would like one of those free consultations, it is open, but I've got to tell you that I am not open much to taking on new clients. It would depend on the situation, but there's just a limited amount of availability there. Still, I am dedicated to helping people cultivate their genuine confidence, not imposter syndrome, not Dunning-Kruger. That is where you think you know more than you do. Help people identify their genuine confidence and cultivate that. What time I have available, I want to help people. But I'm taking a hiatus from trying to do live broadcasts, live streaming, publishing, that sort of thing. We'll see where things go. I guess we might call this a sabbatical, and who knows how long it will last. In any case, I appreciate you, and I hope that some of these ideas that we have shared will be useful to you. Don't know when I'll see you again, but I'll be back.